Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and this is a list of 7 games to work your way slowly through if you like Catan. Catan, designed by Klaus Tauber, is a classic for a reason. It's a game that is simple and accessible enough that it managed to draw in a very large audience, well past the world of dedicated hardcore gamers. And yet it's also complicated enough to feel a little bit more rewarding than the typical things you may have found in Target and Walmart and wherever you shop for games. If you grew up in Monopoly and Risk, Catan probably felt refreshing and a taste of something new. And so it straddled that line of being a game that is accessible but strategic, interesting, giving you new things you hadn't seen before in games, giving you the luck of the dice with a lot more sense of control and strategy over what you're doing, and giving you a focus of more of a Euro mechanism as opposed to the typical Ameritrash that many of us grew up with. And Catan, for many of us, was a great gateway game. Catan, for many of us, was one of the games we grew to learn to love and to roll those dice and gather those resources and figure out the best way to move forward in the game. And then once we were done figuring our way moving forward in the game, to figure out what expansions or add-ons or where else this gaming hobby can take us. And so this today is a list of 7 games that are worth checking out. 7 games that are worth looking into if you are someone who's enjoyed Catan and are looking to slowly work your way up through this. This list is going to be ranked in order of what I think is the easiest and most accessible, all the way up to the most complicated from these. And so starting off with the very first one, which is going to be Valeria Card Kingdoms. Now this over here, the reason I'm recommending this one, I'll go through all of these as far as why they're being recommended in different ways, but Valeria Card Kingdoms is one of several games that maintain the dice rolling mechanism of Catan. You roll a bunch of dice on your turn, and it doesn't matter whose turn it is, everyone gets stuff. That's true for games like Space Base, for games like Machikoro, for Bad Company, for Valeria Card Kingdoms, and Valeria Card Kingdoms to me is my personal favorite within the genre. It's a game which you are trying to go ahead and buy yourself domains. You're trying to defeat monsters, and you're trying to gather more and more citizens. And all the while you're rolling dice, and you're going to use the dice that the dice are going to trigger the various citizens you have on your turn and on everyone else's turn. But they might trigger differently depending on whose turn it is, and you're trying to gather the resources you need in order to figure out the best pathway forward, the domains you need to buy, the monsters you can defeat, trying to work your way towards the most victory points in the game system, and the game is just going to reward you the entire game. A pro and a con about the game is that you are flooded with resources. You never really run out. You constantly have access to as many resources as you need, but the decision space isn't about being out of resources. The decision space is around the decisions you make because you only have 2 decisions you can make every single turn. You only have 2 actions you can make every turn. The game comes with a ton of expansions. This over here is the big box with almost all the expansion content and a whole lot more, including, first of all, there's the Seas of Valeria, or what's it called? The Crimson Seas of Valeria? Can't remember the name of the expansion, but the expansion that's going to add, they have a sea-based expansion that adds a ton of decision space to the game, as well as a cooperative expansion that completely changes the way you engage with it. And so if you like that dice rolling aspect where every single turn you are getting rewarded, then I recommend Valeria Card Kingdoms. Moving up a tiny notch in complexity, we have Deus over here. Deus from Pearl Games is a very unique game that's going to, just visually it's going to feel a bit reminiscent of Catan even as you go through it, but the general idea, this one's similar to Catan in the sense that you are building a network and you're producing resources, you're using those to go ahead and build buildings, and you're trying to figure out the most efficient way to activate everything and get what you need done in the game. But if you like that aspect of Catan, that you live in this island and you're slowly spreading out, and you're trying to figure out the resources you accumulate, how to spend them on a variety of buildings, and again, how to do that as efficiently as possible as you work your way towards 10 points, Deus takes that and blows it up as far as not the complexity of the game itself, but the amount of things that are happening in the game. Because in Deus, you are constantly building one of 5 different types of buildings in the game. I think it's 5 plus the temples, so 6 buildings if you count the temples. You're building different types of structures in the game, but every time you build a new structure, you cascade and activate all these structures you've already built of that type, which means everything progressively gets more powerful. And the decision space is around trying to figure out what you actually have room and time to build as you go through the experience. So Deus is going to give you that. It's going to give you that route building, that aspect of spreading out across the map. The decision about limited resources and trying to figure out how to spend them and utilize them. There's not really trading with other players, but there's a lot of internal trading with the game itself. If you like Catan, I think Deus is a solid next step game that definitely escalates a bit in complexity while not being so much that it's overwhelming. Then there's Concordia. Concordia is a fantastic game, designed by Matt Gertz. This is a classic for a reason. And Concordia, similar to Deus, is going to have that network building, that producing of resources, the trying to figure out what you actually have room and time to build, but it very much feels like Catan Plus to me. To me, Concordia is always the game that I felt when I think of Catan, but escalated to the next level, escalated to a lot more decision space, I always thought of Concordia. You're going to be wandering around the map with your characters. You're going to have boats, you're going to have settlers, you're wandering around the board, and you're trying to figure out where to build buildings or how to get your production queues up and running. And you're constantly trying to figure out how to manage that network. And you're, again, not really trading with the other players per se. We'll have some more of that as we go through this list. But Concordia is going to give you the sense of what Catan did, but escalated to a whole lot more control as you try to play your hand of cards. You're going to have a hand of cards you can play, take your actions, but then eventually you're going to try to gather those cards back. And so you're trying to build out your hand while building out your network and positioning on the board. So it has some of the main elements, some of that route building, that networks, that cities, that building out all the resources and trying to navigate all of that, but in a whole lot more interesting decision space as you go through Concordia. My number 4 pick over here is going to be the Castles of Burgundy. And again, same idea. This is all about focusing on the way you're going to be building out your own personal city, although this time, unlike some of the others, you are working on your own personal board. Many of these games operate in a shared system, in a shared landscape, the same way you do in Catan. Concordia is going to have you fighting over a board the same way you do in Catan. Deus is going to have you fighting over a board the same way you do in Catan. But in the Castles of Burgundy, you get to be master of your own destiny, so to speak. You are still rolling dice, although the dice are being utilized for your own actions in the game. The dice are not being utilized for a common pool of just resources flooding in, but rather every single turn you're going to roll the dice and try to assign them to a few different possible actions as you again try to build out your own network, your own little island on a board that looks suspiciously like Catan to a certain extent while being very, very different. It's your own personal private board. You're building out a bunch of different tiles from the center board, and you're competing over the tiles that are going to be in the center board more so than the land itself. But you are still building out a network. You are still managing your resources. You are still trying to figure out the best combination of buildings, of actions that will produce a victory for you. This game is a Euro game at its finest. It's a little less competitive, a little less direct interaction than you'll find in something like Deus or Concordia, but the decision space is absolutely beautiful. A lot of rewarding decisions and actions to take. If you like the sense of building in Catan, if you like that sense of just an escalation of growth in the game, Castles of Burgundy is going to give that to you again and again and again, with a ton of variability built into the experience because of all the different ways you can cascade and chain different buildings that you are building out as you build out, well, the Castles of Burgundy. My number 5 pick is going to be Anno 1800, and this is where trading finally enters the mix. Anno 1800, designed by Martin Wallace, and not the only Martin Wallace game we have on the table either, but Anno 1800 is going to be where trading comes in. If you like the trading aspect of Catan, but you want to see it implemented in a game that is a lot meatier in what it's doing, Anno 1800 has you covered. In this game, you are building out production chains. Again, there's not really a shared map in any particular sense. You have your own private board that you're trying to manage how and where different production facilities fit onto that board, but the entire game comes down to trying to take actions to put production into play in order to deplete your hand of cards. The problem is, you need to start producing a lot of different things. You need to build out your facilities, and to that end, you need to work with the other players. If you are constantly focused on trying to just build out everything so you can produce it itself, you either won't be able to, or it's going to take you an obnoxiously long time to do so. Whereas if you're comfortable building things out that others will benefit from, and therefore they'll want to trade with you, and similarly, building things out or taking advantage of what others have built so that you can go ahead and give them the coins they need, let them benefit from the action, but you are able to do things that you wouldn't otherwise have done because they built out that infrastructure and economy of the game. Anno 1800 is all about taking advantage of what others have done and giving others things to take advantage from you while you work your way towards victory. So if trading is why you're here, if the trading of Catan is why you're here, then I highly recommend checking out Anno 1800. My number 6 pick is going to be Le Havre. And Le Havre has a lot of the things we've been talking about. In particular, there's going to be a whole lot of production chains going on here. If resources were all the things that you're about in Catan, if you love that resource production, if you love figuring out ways to just buy what you need with resources and get what you need done, Le Havre is resources on absolute steroids. This game, designed by Ori Rosenberg, has a ton of trying to gather resources, but then trading them for other things, producing other things, utilizing buildings that you've built or other players have built, again, similar to Anno 1800 to a small degree, while being very, very different. You're going to be utilizing all these tools at your disposal to try to take resources in, convert them up a level, continuously onwards, trying to take advantage of the system at play, trying to make sure your people are fed at the end of every round, you have these ocean liners, so to speak, that you're going through. You have to manage your food production. You're trying to take advantage of an absolute ton of buildings in the game. So again, you have the variety to an extent. You have the sheer variety of what you have in Castles of Burgundy, and then some. There's a whole lot more buildings going on in this game. There's a whole decks of extra buildings, so you always have something fresh to incorporate or to mix in there. But you are trying to not really trade with other players, but build off what other players have built. Take advantage of what they've built. Utilize those things. Don't worry about what income they get. Just understand that you are working in a shared economy. Le Havre is one of Uwe Rosenberg's finest games and a masterpiece of just resource production chains, converting this into that, and trying to do so as efficiently as possible, better than the other players. And then lastly, a game that is very similar to Catan, but on a very, very heavily escalated level, we have Birmingham. This is the other Martin Wallace title. The way we had our Anno 1800 over here, Birmingham is a incredibly heavy game compared to what Catan is. If you are diving into this as somebody who played Catan for the first time and you're finding this video, well, first of all, welcome aboard, enjoy this. But past that, I would definitely recommend starting with Valeria card kingdoms, with Deus, possibly with Concordia, maybe even Castles of Burgundy, but I'd recommend holding off an Anno 1800, Le Havre, and Birmingham until you have a little bit more under your belt. Birmingham in particular is a meaty game. There's a lot of decision space to be had here, but it has some of the core aspects that Catan has. It has some of that core aspect that you're working on a shared map. You're constantly vying over system spaces on the board, trying to get there before others do, but with a lot more interesting decisions as far as how you get there or how you build out your network and your infrastructure. You're being mindful of the resources you're gathering. You're being mindful of the buildings you're building. You're being mindful of how you're going to trade everything in for points in the game. This game it has the core components that Catan has, but it has so much more. It has two different phases of the game, the rail area and the canal area. It has, the idea that you're going to be selling different resources to different buildings, so you're managing all of that. There's two different versions. There's Birmingham and Lancashire, and they all have different aspects going on. There's debts and loans you can take on. So it gives you the core building blocks that you are used to and familiar with Catan. You will find those in Birmingham. You'll find those in Lancashire. But the games give you so much more to work off of that. The rule set is actually surprisingly simple for these games. These are not meaty, complicated games in terms of the actual rules. They are meaty, complicated games in terms of the decisions you are making within a fairly simple rule set, but one that gives you so much stuff to process and think through as you optimize your way towards victory in Birmingham. If you like the core concept of what Catan made you feel, but you're looking for something a lot less luck dependent and a lot more fleshed out, Birmingham may well be the epitome, the final step in a world of people who like Catan. It might be the final destination along that trip. And in any case, until next time, these are my 7 games that I think I would recommend to somebody who likes Catan and is looking for something more. If you're watching this video, if you're a fan of Catan, if you have other suggestions that you think are a great choice for that person who likes Catan that you think is a great game for them, by all means drop it in the comments down below. I'd be very interested to see what else makes the cut. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this video helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.